Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Say What podcast, hosted to you live from Houston, Texas. My name is Mike Lagaris, and I am joined by my colleague and co-host from the great state of Georgia, Mr. Kali Young.
Michael, how you doing?
Doing good. And before we even start, I just want to say congratulations to one of the newest senior managers of Accenture, Mr. Kali Young, right? Congrats on the promotion.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Now, every guest that we have on this podcast is special. I just want to put that out there. Tonight, we have two titans in the business industry, titans within the Black community, two people that I look up to, and I hope all of you will look up to as well. We have our very own managing director from Accenture, Mr. Ra Thomas. Ra Thomas, managing director, Accenture, a Black executive that has been authentic and transparent throughout his journey. Currently, the cloud-first leader for New England products, managing a $300 million portfolio helping clients accelerate to the cloud. Infrastructure account leader, responsible for helping clients with infrastructure technologies such as cloud, data center, 5G, support, collaboration, and end-user technologies. National digital workplace leader, leading the sales and delivery with clients in remote working and return to office strategy technologies. The flagship innovation hub delivery lead. The New England Inclusion and Diversity executive sponsor. How's it going, Rob?
Feeling good out here, man. Feeling good out here. I'm happy to be here.
That's what's up. And we also have the Chief Executive Officer of the Black Economic Alliance, Mr. David Clunie. David Clunie, Chief Executive Officer of the Black Economic Alliance, a coalition of the nation's wealthiest and most powerful Black CEOs and executives who are using their power collectively to systematically improve wealth building for Black Americans. Raises millions of dollars and endorses candidates for elective office who will prioritize Black wealth building. Helps advise public, private, and non-profit leaders on how to improve sustainable wealth creation opportunities for Black people, focusing on work, wages, and wealth. Advocates for, educates, and helps turn out Black voters. Runs a foundation that crafts programs like the $50 million venture capital fund to invest in Black entrepreneurs. Earlier appointed by Barack Obama under Timothy Geithner and Jack Lew, was one of only two Black managing directors in the corporate responsibility group of JP Morgan and Chase.
Yeah, good to be with you. Looking forward to the conversation.
That's what's up. All right. So we're really excited to have both of you here. And Ra, I was looking at some of your background. I saw that you grew up in Rhode Island. Is that correct?
That is a fact. That's Cape Verdean town. Well, my Cape Verdean out there.
Now, please, sir, you are not a Patriot fan, are you?
Please,
we'll stop this right now. There is no inclusion with that. I can't handle. You see that behind me right there? Can't deal with it.
I am a try and true Jets fan. I'm a Knicks fan. It's been a long time. All right, so
I'm talking about.
That's what I'm talking about, buddy.
I didn't expect that answer.
Yeah.
That's what's up. All right, that's what's up. So in Rhode Island, you have a very interesting background. And when you were young, it looked like you became captain, president, vice president. You were moving up the ranks in high school. What was the motivating factor for you? What was your drive to achieve greatness at an early age?
I mean, honestly, it really stems from my mom. I mean, really, I'm a mama's boy, and no judgment, you know what I'm saying? I'm a mama's boy out here, and I just saw my mom just fighting, just trying to find a way to put food on the table for us 4 kids, growing up in low-income housing. It was real, and she found a way to put food on the table every day. So, I'm not gonna lie, it was that part, and then another part, which is, I'm gonna give credit to Buju, right? Believe it or not. I mean, Buju helped me down, yo. I mean, listening to Buju growing up, and the music and the culture, I just had to find a way to get through. Untold stories is the mantra of my life. So, yeah.
That's good. So Ra, just to kind of piggyback off that, so starting at the bottom and working your way all the way to the top, besides your drive to succeed, what was the number one factor that enabled you to succeed as you have done? I know you mentioned your mom, so I don't know if it was overall family, was it support within Accenture or some mentorship? What helped you? What was the number one factor that enabled you to succeed?
I talk a lot about my mom and her being the guiding force, but I'm gonna pull something a little different here and say that the impact of my father not being there was a driving force for me throughout my life. My father's been incarcerated my entire life and growing up, and never really had a father, right? And I knew that when I wanted to, once I got into Accenture, I had a child very young. I was 22 years old, 23 years old. I had my first son. And I wanted to be a father in my son's life. I wanted to provide for my son. I wanted to make sure that he was going to be good in life. And, all those nights, those sleepless nights, it just gives you an unimaginable energy to continue forward and get up and move forward. I needed to be better. I needed to be better. And then through that, I learned that, I had a lot of people that jumped in throughout my life to help me out when I was young, to in high school, to in college, and even in Accenture. A lot of people came in to help me out, and I'll never, ever forget that. Never forget that. So I never forget where I come from. I never forget, where I'm going. And I'm always, it is crucial to make sure you take care of the people in the community, to make care of you. And honestly, like I saw my best friend was murdered when I was young. My other best friend went down a different path, it could have been real easy for me to make a different decision. And I made it, but I made it in spite of all of the obstacles that continue to get put on in front of our people. So,
wow.
Honestly, I was just on the grind, man, just on the grind, fellas.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So David, so I noticed that you actually attended a non-HBCU for undergrad, and you attended a HBCU for law school. Was it Hampton? Or was
the other HU, Howard University. Thank you very much. For the real HU, please stand up.
That was intentional.
I knew. I saw your face too. My father went to Hampton, so we go through this all the time.
Okay, gotcha. So, in your opinion, what are the differences that you noticed between non-HBCU and HBCU colleges?
Yeah, so a ton of differences, and let me start with the premise that I will admit, growing up, I just said my father went to Hampton University, which is a phenomenal institution. And I had a perception of HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, that they were lesser than, that essentially the degrees and the education you received coming out of there would not be valued as well or as highly, both by myself, the substance of it, but also in the marketplace as highly as majority institutions. Nobody told me that. Nobody ever said that to me. You talk about, inherent bias and unconscious bias and systemic racism. That is absolutely a product of me thinking that, something that is Black is of less value. Not until I was more exposed. And it's strange because I had exposure, and my father went to Hampton. He used to go back to homecoming. He was so close with his friends. So going to an HBCU undergrad, I went to see a bunch of different schools, but I had this only if I have to kind of personality or mentality about it. So I went to the State University of New York at Albany undergrad, had a phenomenal experience there. One of the best things I ever did was join Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. That's how Ra and I know each other, which is, we call it the School for the Better Making of Men, and would love to talk more about that too. But going to an HBCU, the difference was I was taught, and let me be very clear, I now have a completely different perception of HBCUs. I think it is one of the best training grounds for Black people in America, and it has been a driver of social and economic mobility for generations of Black folks since before the end of slavery. They were HBCUs that were founded before the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, and then a lot of them came online, Howard, Morehouse, Spelman, and others, right after 1, 2, 3, 4 years after the abolition of slavery. And they have been this breeding ground of Black excellence for years and years and years. So the difference between going to a majority institution and an HBCU for me was, at a majority institution, I was usually one of very few Black people in the classroom. And I remember multiple times, talking about race, talking about, different things. And like everybody would turn around and look at me for the Black perspective, but feeling other than and different than. Whereas, I was taught how to be a Black lawyer in a non-Black society at the Howard University School of Law. And, I was at the training ground of where the lawyers, Thurgood Marshall went to law school, and where lawyers were putting together the series of cases that became the Brown versus Board of Education series of cases, among others. So it was hallowed ground. And I would, one of the best things I think to come out of the pandemic has been HBCUs getting more recognition and getting their flowers for the critical role that they play in putting Black folks on a path to essentially excellence, opportunity. And I love that now more companies or folks across industries are making a commitment to view HBCUs differently. And they need to look at more than just Howard, Morehouse, and Spelman, but the entire, over 100 network of over 100 HBCUs that are out there.
Yeah. So to that point, right, do you think that talent that attends HBCUs are overlooked by corporate America from a recruitment standpoint?
Absolutely. And I think what we've gotten into in the past few years, even before 2020, was a number of organizations, have built pipelines to the kind of top 3 Howard, Morehouse, and Spelman schools, and they will take a handful of students. In fact, my law firm, Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison, where I started my career, they had a tendency to take one person from Howard every year. And it was a way to kind of, they were doing more than a lot of law firms. A lot of law firms weren't taking anybody from HBCUs, but essentially you'd have to be in the top, 5-10% of the class, and you had to be extraordinary instead of their kind of criteria for other schools. And
right.
I think we're now starting to have a conversation about how much inherent bias and systemic racism has played a role in how the education and the criteria that is applied to Black folks and HBCUs relative to predominantly white institutions and majority institutions. So I think there's a long road to travel. We're just starting to scratch the surface of, you hear a lot of companies say we can't find good talent, and HBCUs are a hotbed, just an absolutely target-rich environment of Black talent across the country.
That's
so
excellent.
Yeah, just one thing, Michael. So one of I always wanted to attend the HBCU, and actually, so I'm from New Jersey originally. I live in Atlanta now, so this is the home of, Spelman, Morehouse, Clark, all that stuff, right? So I always wanted to attend HBCU, but I didn't. And the reason I didn't, it was because I was worried how I would be able to acclimate myself with society after I graduate, right? If I'm at HBCU, I'm around everyone that looks like me, right? That has, similar experiences as I do, learning about my culture from my people. And then when I have to transition out of college and go into corporate America, I'm not surrounded by people that look like me. I'm surrounded by others. And I was worried about how I would be able to acclimate myself within society. But I like what you just spoke about as far as how your perception and how it changed once you actually attended HBCU. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that, David. Yeah, no, that was very educational. And I know that, when you started your career, David, you worked in corporate America. And then in 2008, there was this man called Barack Obama who became the United States 44th president. And you served as the deputy director of voter protection during his Iowa campaign. And so I believe, at least this is what I'm told, that, when you move from corporate America to the government or politics, there is a dip in pay from what I've heard. Why did you make that choice? Why did you were already on your way up in corporate America. Why deviate?
Yeah, it's a great question. And my parents thought I was nuts because I come from a family of both of my parents were born and raised in New York City, but their parents all came from Jamaica. So a lot of my upbringing was influenced by, kind of conservative Jamaican values where you go to school, you go to grad school, law school, med school, whatever, you become a doctor, lawyer, and that's your job. And when I got my job at my law firm, it was like, I've arrived, I make partner there, stay there forever, make a lot of money and, be happy. So a few years into my job at my law firm, well, one, it was just a once in a lifetime opportunity. I was never a person who was super into politics. I went to law school in DC, which made me more interested, being near Capitol Hill and being near, all of the executive branch, the White House and the other executive branch agencies. But when I came out, I was really, really interested more in Barack Obama than I was in, politics itself. And I knew people who were getting on the campaign and doing different things. I had some experience in voter protection in particular. So I was really interested in applying that experience on this campaign. And it was an opportunity for me I just planned to drive out to Iowa, spend a couple months there and tell my grandkids one day that, that the grandpa went out to Iowa and had this experience to help the first Black president get elected. And that turned into this career in politics that has taken me in and out of the private sector. But it's a very different world. And in fact, my salary, the difference between my salary at my law firm and when I went to the White House was about 1/3. It was significantly lower. In fact, let me keep it all the way real. When I first went to the White House, I was unpaid. I went on what's called the associates program for about 4 months. I did not get paid at all. And my parents said, this is not a job, you're volunteering because you get paid for a job. I don't know what you think you're doing. And you can't come back here and live on the couch and you don't know if this doesn't work out. But they, when I was able to bring them down to the White House after I started getting paid and introduce them to the president and bring them into the Oval Office, my father whispered in my ear on the way into the White House, or in the way into the Oval Office. He was like, all right, maybe you knew what you were doing. So it was really for me an opportunity to be a part of something that was bigger than me. And that's what I got my first taste of on the campaign. I had never felt such a connection to my work before. And I was so impressed by all the people I worked with. I was impressed by the people at my law firm, but it was a different kind of thing about being a part of a movement and being part of something that's so much bigger than you. And, the opportunity to not only do that on the campaign, but to do that full time in my job and to go to Washington, D.C., work in the White House was amazing. And I was really fortunate, to be in the right place at the right time. But like Ra, I just worked as hard as I could. And one of the things that has been a key to success for me, I never consider myself to be the smartest person in the room, but I will always work hard and I will always leave it all on the field. And that's exactly what I did on the campaign in the White House to earn my job, because I was essentially trying out for a job for 4 months and got the job 4 months in and then started getting paid. And even when I was getting paid, that's the least money I've made in my career, even less than when I made for when I clerked for a federal judge. So it was not about the money, it was about the experience.
And before we go to the next question, if you let our listeners know, what is President Barack Obama like?
He is that dude. He is everything he seems like, on TV. He is super down to earth. He is very cognizant, especially when he was president, that when he's walking by somebody, when he's passing by, when he's interacting with somebody, that is a very big deal to them. So he will stop, he will engage them, he will ask them questions and, ask what they're working on. He used to walk around the office and visit people. He said, thank you. He was just really salt of the earth, good person, good dude, such a great representation of America for our children as an example, but also just as a model for the rest of the world to follow. And we were really, really lucky to have him. I think he was before his time. But I feel so fortunate to have been in a place in my life and my career where I had the opportunity to work.
Well,
I always wanted to meet him just so I could play him in basketball and beat him in basketball and talk noise to him, but never had the opportunity to do so. So
well, he's still out and about. He's not playing as much these days because he started to get hurt a little bit. There were a couple little, elbows to the nose and the Secret Service was like, look, this is a little much. We got to cut this down.
Well, later in your career, you were appointed by President Obama to serve as the U.S. Treasury Department in front of the office of the two Treasury Secretaries, Geithner and Jack Lew, correct?
Yeah, correct.
So as an executive secretary at the level that you were at, what type of I&D efforts were occurring, in the White House?
It's a great question because, when I joined the administration as a lawyer at the White House, I was essentially a mid-level lawyer. I wasn't very senior. When I went to the Treasury Department, I was a little more senior. And then once I got my promotion and took over the office of the executive secretary, became the executive secretary, I was part of what's called the senior executive service, and I was part of Secretary Liu's senior staff. So, I had a lot more of a platform to speak on issues. But while it was something that the Obama administration focused on, it was not nearly the level of priority that it is now. I think both as a result of what we've been through in the last few years, but particularly the last year and a half, and especially after George Floyd's murder, and the just outcries for justice coming from across the country. But also there wasn't the political environment to put the kind of resources behind racial equity, inclusion, and diversity that we now have from the Biden administration. And I think we look back, a lot of folks that I worked with in the Obama White House and at the Obama Treasury Department think about what we could have done differently. And that is honestly one place where I myself, as a senior, member of that team, but also working with other folks, think we could have done more to call attention to, racial equity issues, particularly coming out of the Great Recession, coming out of the financial crisis of 2008, and being very focused on the kind of inherent inequities in our economy. And that's all my work is about now. That's all, DEA has been doing with the Biden administration, with Congress. But there's a completely different political environment to have that conversation now. But I do wish I had been more forward leaning. It was something I talked about. It was something I worked on with my own hiring and all that. And I helped. One of the things the Dodd-Frank Act passed was it required that every economic agency had something called the Office of Minority and Women Inclusion, OMWI. So I was helpful in, there's a woman named Lorraine Cole, who's the OMWI at Treasury, and we worked closely together in helping to stand up that office. And she's still there now, to her credit, and she's done phenomenal work. But it's just a completely different environment now, and I'm happy that we're actually, really putting our shoulder to the wheel and doing a lot more work in this space. That's excellent.
So to that point, so I noticed that you hold and you've held C-suite level positions within prominent companies. So a lot of time businesses, they will report on how well companies are doing from an I&D, inclusion and diversity perspective based on overall numbers, and not really from a top level perspective. So what's your viewpoint on the low numbers in corporate America as it pertains to Black talent and executive C-suite level positions? And if you do view it as an issue, what would be your suggestion on somehow to increase those numbers?
It's absolutely an issue, and it's an issue of culture. It's an issue of pipeline building. I think what a lot of companies have gotten into is tokenism. They've said we need one Black person, on our executive committee. We need one Black person in our C-suite. We need one Black person on our board. And my father told me an interesting story. I worked at JP Chase for a number of years after coming out of the administration from the Treasury Department before coming to the Black Economic Alliance. And my father had worked at Chase years ago, back in the 80s and 90s. And he said he stood up at a shareholders meeting in the 80s and asked, why is there only one Black person on the board at JP Morgan, or at the time, at Chase Manhattan Bank? And I said, well, that's interesting because there's only one Black person on the board now. And, we're 30 years later. So why are we having the same conversations? And I think we have failed to build infrastructure in the culture of these organizations that essentially create opportunities to build a pipeline, build succession plans. I saw an interesting article from an HR professional that said, 5 places that systemic racism hides in the workplace. And a lot of it had to do with succession planning, talent reviews, the ways that we review and critique the people we work with. So I think we're just starting to scratch the surface now of the cultural problem we've had around it. And we're getting away from tokenism and thinking, you think about a lot of these functions were called diversity, 5-10 years ago, that's all it was. We've now added the words inclusion, and equity is such an important part of that, because equity is about meeting people where they are, acknowledging the difference in experiences that people have had, and creating systems that meet people where they are and essentially create a level playing field by helping people have equal access to opportunity, which we just know has not been the case. So we have a long way to go, but I think we're starting to have some of the right conversations across industries.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of, I noticed that when you talk about, the percentage of Black people in America, and then you kind of rub that against, the percentage of Black people that actually lead, Fortune 500 companies, and there's a large disparity. And so, Ra, I see you just joined back, and we were talking about Black executives and the ratio between Black talent and, C-suite level positions. I noticed that, so as a Black executive, Ra, within, the largest and most successful consulting firm in the world, have you met challenges from your clients or customers because of who you are? And if you do, how do you get through that rough patch when you do experience those issues based on who you are and what you look like?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think that, and I don't think it's unique. I mean, I think that people will always experience problems. I don't want that to be a thing, right? But as a Black man, or a Black woman, believe it or not, I think there are a different, another series of problems that start to emerge. Me personally, I have been, sort of kicked out of boardrooms. I've had very, very challenging client relationships. And I think that, the best thing that really at least helped me to Accenture is the fact of how people responded when I've hit those areas of adversity. I think that I've had good leadership within Accenture. I've had good teams to be able to help me sort of navigate through that space. And more than anything, I think that it actually furthermore inspired me to figure out how I can affect change in this space. And what I've focused on right now specifically, I'm focusing on value and how do we redefine value in corporate America? Because too often I see younger generation folks come in. I had a younger brother came in and he was wearing sort of sneakers with a suit, and that wasn't considered professional attire. And then from that, it comes up and boils up, and on a performance review, they say, "Oh, he doesn't have a professional presence." And I'm like, "Wait, I mean, that's we could just tell him, hey,
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think, well, what's the value that we possess? And when I look at a lot of our people of color, a lot of the value that we possess is not just our ability to migrate applications to the cloud. It's not just our ability to do tasks in any given thing, but we have a unique skill set. Most of the people of color have a unique skill set to overcome adversity. They have a earn to help in the community. They have a urge to work within humanity and ethics and all these things, sustainability, all these things that are now starting to be very important in corporate America. People of color have been doing this for a long time. And that value, that skill set needs to be harnessed. And most of the time when we look at, recruiting talent, we're like, well, does this person relate to me? Does this person, do I want to hire this person? Do I want to work with this person every day? And no offense, I don't really care if you want to work with me every day. That might be irrelevant for my ability to be able to deliver for a client, right? And and that's the thing that we have to sort of change our mentality. We have to start redefining how we can really understand value and continue to promote value.
Yeah. And you specifically, you sit on the board of directors for CareerWise New York and YMCA in the Bronx, as well as the advisory to the New York Jobs CEO Council. There's many people that look to you, your actions, your voice for the way. When you speak to people, when you sit in front of people of color or all peoples, what is the overarching message? What is the vision? What are you trying to let people know when you speak with them?
I think the first thing is, first I try to bring out authenticity, because I think for too long we've been dealing with assimilation. We've been dealing with trying to fit in. So the first thing I try to do is I just come with some level of authenticity, because I need to let them understand that value is different than the way they're perceived, and social norms are rapidly changing in front of our eyes. That's the first thing, right? But then the second thing is that we will not be able to solve the problems of tomorrow by doing the same things that we've done in the past. So we need to do things differently. So if we're like, well, that's not how it's been done. I'm like, well, then that's probably an inkling that we're going in the right direction, right? Oh, policy says this. And I'm like, well, that's probably something that we should change, right? We actually have to critically think about the problems that we're facing, critically look at the data, critically look at value, and then redefine these things. And we got to think bold. I mean, very bold. And I mean, I'm talking, we're talking to, we were actually on New York City Jobs Council. We're talking about how do we, the concept of a degree is flawed, right? Because education is inherently flawed, right? And people of color don't have access to the same resources in order to get the type of education, and they're unfortunately going to be disadvantaged. So how do we go back and fix that? Right. And maybe they might go to a community college and get a great education and have some real skills, but they're not, because it's not a Harvard or it's not a Syracuse or Albany, they might not get the same type of calls back. Right. So we got to rethink that. We got to rethink. Right now, we're looking at micro credentials. We're looking at how do we give people the skills, trainings, and certifications, and then how do the corporations still value that when they bring them in? And then when they bring them in, how do they continue to promote them and give them opportunity? So we have to redefine pretty much everything. I mean, honestly,
Right.
Redefine everything.
You're looking at the status quo and you're saying the way opportunities are created now is just not fair. And there's a lens to look at it and find that true value. And I really appreciate that. And people, pioneers like you, gentlemen, women, people who look at it like that, change the world for the better. And hopefully that is the case. David, before we conclude this interview, I want to ask you this question. The Black Economic Enterprise is laser focused in helping the Black community and creating Black wealth. Understood. As the chief executive officer of that company, what are you doing to better help grow your company from an inclusion and diversity perspective? Not really just helping the Black community, but the Asian community, the white community, the gay community, right? Everyone. What steps are you taking as the CEO to highlight that?
So I think it ties back to Ra's point about value. One of the kind of proper directions that this discussion is heading in now is looking at empirical data about the performance of companies that have different perspectives represented and how much better they perform than companies and organizations that are, homogenous and don't have a diversity of perspectives. In order for us to make systemic change, one of the things that the Black Economic Alliance has central to our work, and we focus on improving work, wages, and wealth for Black folks. And we are an organization of some of the most successful, wealthiest, and highest ranking Black CEOs, senior corporate executives in America, billionaires, 100 millionaires, folks who have started companies and who are investing in others, who are creating other millionaires. They are essentially they're saying, we realize that we are very much the exception, not the rule. We want to become the rule, not the exception. One of the things that we acknowledge and one of the central tenets of our objective is to make everybody understand that in order for the entire US economy to do better, we have to fix the structural damage in the Black economy. And it's not charity for Black folks. It is a necessary component of any effective growth strategy for the US economy. There are statistics behind this. McKinsey, for example, put out a report in 2019 that showed if you were to close the Black-white wealth gap, you could add between 4 to 6% growth to US real GDP by 2028. Citi, the financial institution, put out a report in fall of 2020 that showed the US economy has missed out on 16 trillion with a T, that's $800 billion a year over 20 years, $16 trillion of growth as a result of racial inequality. And then we could add $5 trillion to US GDP if we were to close that gap. Our objective is to say, we're all in this together. And let's figure out how, the term rising tide lifts all boats. I want to get away from it because Black folks haven't had boats in throughout American history. But working with other communities, the Latinx community, the LGBTQ community, the Asian community, all underserved women, underserved and underrepresented communities, figuring out how we can all help each other advance. It helps the whole. Growing the pie helps everyone. And allyship is a really, really important and strong part of that. So we make sure that we are there for our, partners. We've talked about stopping Asian hate. We've talked about, being part of wanting to find, unity among communities that have had a hard time getting along. So we want to make sure that we're showing up for other folks, because we are absolutely asking for other folks to show up for us. And that was one of the things I think I really appreciated about this past year and a half, was that you had people from every community, not just Black folks, calling out, that Black Lives Matter, marching in the streets, calling for a, like Ross said, complete culture shift and like changing everything about how we do not only criminal justice, but looking at every American institution and saying it has been inherently unfair and inequitable to Black folks. Let's fix that. And I think we need to do that across the board and see how it's treated everybody, because it's a benefit to us all when we are able to recognize when a system has been unfair and how we fix it to make it more inclusive and representative of everybody that interacts with it.
Awesome. That's real. That's wisdom from these two gentlemen here. Excellent interview. Thank you very much. And so Ra, if anyone wants to reach out to you, check out some of the stuff that you're putting out, where could they do that?
Honestly, the easiest way is to hit me up on LinkedIn. I go by Ra Thomas. Just hit me up and let's engage.
All right. I know you have some podcasts, some real good media getting put out there. So it's awesome. Go check them out. And David, if anybody wants to check in on the Black Economic Alliance and see some of the important work that your team is doing, where could they do that?
Same deal. Check us out on social media, BLK Econ Alliance at Twitter, Black Economic Alliance on Instagram. We have a YouTube page with a lot of our content, a lot of the programming we've done over the last few years. You can just Google Black Economic Alliance or go to our website, blackeconomicalliance.org.
All right. You heard the man. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Peace out.